Right, we're gonna get this webinar going. I realise you're taking up your evening, so thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Mitesh from Success at School, and I'm going to be your host for the evening. As parents, you may have a lot of questions when it comes to your child having a career with the British Army, and so today we welcome the British Army to answer all these questions. To help you understand about opportunities, bursaries, and scholarships offered by the British Army, you will hear from Amy Pettit, Marketing Partnerships Manager of the Army in Education, Colonel Craig Tablanche, Branch Colonel of Education Training Services, David Cook, Recruitment Operations Manager, and Mark Harrison, Lead on Army Scholarships. Before I hand it over to Craig, I have a small request. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat and we'll go through them in the Q&A session at the end. We're expecting quite a few to be joining us this evening, so we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. The webinar will also be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, Success at School, so you can rewatch the webinar in your free time if you've want to go over anything. Craig, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. You know, I think probably I expect most of you are parents. We're probably at an age now where our own children and our nephews and nieces are thinking about that next stage in life. Perhaps your children are just about to start GCSEs or a little bit beyond that, and you're looking for a whole variety of options. The first thing I'd say is, if you're interested in exploring further the various options that the Army has for your young people, then please go and have a look at the Army website. Just search Army jobs in Google. Other search engines are available, and you should be able to get a lot of the information that we will try and impart this evening. But quite importantly, there's going to be a little bit of time at the end of the session for a bit of Q&A. So if there are some questions you want to ask, pop them in the chat, and we'll endeavour to do that. So I've been introduced as the Educational and Training Services Branch Colonel. I like to style myself as the Army's head teacher. And for some people, it's a bit of a surprise to really understand how much investment the Army puts into our soldiers and our officers. And it shouldn't really be a surprise, because we like to say that people aren't in the Army, people are the Army. And if you want to upgrade your Army, you have to upgrade your people. And for a very long time, certainly since we've had military engineers constructing forts and bridges, we've had sort of artillery officers and soldiers dealing with very scientific and technical pieces of equipment. We have, as an Army, invested in the education of our soldiers and officers. And we've been doing apprenticeships for a very long time. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we are the largest apprenticeship provider in the country. We have 15,000 apprentices, 7,000 starts a year. We are nationally recognized. We are the #1 apprentice provider out of the top 100 in the UK. And very recently, we were the subject of an Ofsted inspection, and we were graded good and outstanding in a number of areas. So, Amy, I think we've got a video to play in the next slide. So if we go on to that, please. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. So I think, a picture paints 1,000 words, and you've heard it from our apprentices in their own words. It's a really fantastic opportunity for somebody who perhaps doesn't want to go to university or college, perhaps for somebody who doesn't want to be settled with student debt, perhaps somebody who also perhaps didn't excel at school, or perhaps even achieve the grades that they or perhaps you wanted them to. And there are a whole variety of reasons why that might happen. And one of the things that we are very good at in the Army is taking young people that perhaps didn't achieve as much as they could have at school and giving them a real opportunity to do a bit of a regain, and to join us with absolutely no qualifications at all. And that's the key thing I want to really sort of emphasize, is that there are no educational entry standards to join the British Army. And 95% of all the soldiers who join us will be put onto an apprenticeship. And you can see on the slide here the sort of fields that you could do an apprenticeship in: engineering, medical, intel and comms, HR and finance, logistics, and also, in combat as well. So these are just some of the areas, and we'll go into some details there. So there are a whole variety of reasons why, as I said, somebody might be considering apprenticeships as opposed to doing a more traditional route going to university. And I'd like to expand on that. So Amy, if we go for the next slide, please. So what does it look like? You can join the Army. You can actually apply to join the Army from the ages of 15 and 7 months. You can actually join when you're 15 and 9 months. Very few people actually do that. The window for joining the Army actually extends all the way to age 36, but normally it's between 16 and 18. And everybody joins as a private soldier unless you're going to go on to be an officer, and Dave will speak about that a little bit later. You do your 3 months of basic training, and then straight after your basic training, and basic training is where you learn the essentials of soldiering, drill, discipline, how to dress yourself, how to react to orders, how to make your bed. And if you're wondering, how it is you get your young person to learn how to smarten up their room and tidy their beds, the Army might be the solution for that. Once they've done the initial trade training, their basic training, they go on to whatever trade training is sort of associated with their part of the Army, and they get paid straight away. And the key thing you have to realize is that the Army is a very progressive organization. We have got inbuilt promotion for those people who want to extend beyond the minimum of 4 years, right up to 24 years or even beyond that. So there's no dead-end jobs. Everybody will have the opportunity to progress steadily throughout their careers and getting qualifications as they go along. And it's one of the things that I always really like to reinforce to people, is that, for lots of young people, 4 years might be all that they need or might want to do in the Army, and that still can be an extremely successful military career. Think about it. Somebody can join the Army age 18, they can leave age 22, they will have got, they've been paid, they've got an apprenticeship, level 2, level 3 apprenticeship, they won't have any student debt, they'll have a reference from His Majesty the King that they're highly employable. And I speak to employers all the time. They're always telling me how desperate they are to employ people from the armed services, and the Army in particular. So there's a lot more to it than just the qualifications. It's the life skills. It's learning to get on with other people. It's learning, teamwork and management and leadership skills as well. Can we go on to the next slide, please? If you can hear some growling, that's my little miniature schnauzer that's clearly seen a cat in the back garden. Right, so how does it work? So there are a couple of different routes into the apprenticeships. One of them might be, I'm just going to close the door for my dog. Apologies, that wasn't scripted at all. Right, so there are a couple of routes into the apprenticeships, and one of them is to go to the Army Foundation College in Harrogate. Those are for people who are younger soldiers who want to go through training with people their own age, and there are real benefits to that. So Harrogate is one way of doing it. Once they've finished Harrogate, they can go on to the initial trade training and then go on to the apprenticeships there. Next slide, please. Right, so these are all the different types of apprenticeships we offer. We offer 39 different apprentice standards, and you can see that they are very wide-ranging. Everything from radio, communications, technician type stuff, all the way through to animal welfare, ground aviation, all that's helicopters, business admin, driving, working with explosives, engineering, construction, chefing. All these things are available through the Army, and it's obviously it costs people absolutely nothing to do it. And whilst they're getting the qualifications, they're also getting those really important sort of soft skills that you need to succeed in the workplace, teamwork, leadership, communication skills, all those sort of things as well. And running alongside this, your young people will also get functional skills qualifications should they need them. That is to say, their literacy and numeracy qualifications will run in parallel and are embedded in the apprenticeship as well. So there we go. Lots of opportunities. Some of the stuff's really exciting. And I'm always very envious when I go to visit our apprentices learning their skill and trade, because it is, as you saw from the video, it's genuinely quite exciting stuff. Right, next slide then. Right, we've been doing this, I mentioned, for 100 years. So 100 years ago, the British Army decided it needed to transform from being a horse-drawn army into a mechanized army. And so they developed the first apprenticeship colleges. There were up to 16 or 17 of them across the country. Those have all more or less been replaced by the modern apprenticeship program, which has been in existence for 20, 25 years, where soldiers learn their particular trade on the job, alongside some of their more academic studies as well. And all of this is embedded in their experiences as being a soldier. Today, we are looking at our apprenticeships to take us out of the mechanized age into the digital age. And so we're doing quite a lot of work in making sure that people have got the relevant digital skills to succeed, not only in the army, but in industry as well. Right, thanks, Amy. Right, so all the different levels that there are. So, as I said, 95% of the people who join the army will be put onto an apprenticeship. The majority will go on to a level 2 apprenticeship, which is the equivalent of GCSEs, A to C. And some other more technical ones, well, a lot of them will have the opportunity to then go on to level 3, but some of the trades offer level 3, which is the equivalent of A levels. And in fact, we offer apprenticeships all the way to level 6 and 7, but level 6 in particular, the CMDA, the Chartered Management Degree Apprenticeship. So you can join the army literally with no schooling at all. You can do your apprenticeship, go all the way through the levels, and you could end up with a degree, all for free, all while you work, all part of your career. Right, next slide, please. Right, there you've got it on a nutshell. Army apprenticeships, a wonderful opportunity for young people. And I think, one of the things that always sort of clinches it for me is the increased lifetimes earning of our apprentices. We had Oxford University recently do a study for us, and £500 million is injected into the British economy every year, just from the increased earnings of generations of army apprentices. Right, thanks, Amy.
Okay, good evening. I was introduced earlier, David Cook. I'm the head of the Regional Officer Recruiting Team. I run a team of 19 based across the UK, and we go into schools and colleges and universities to discuss and present at careers fairs about Army officer options. We also get involved in the selection process, although we're not going to cover that tonight. What I want to cover is the sort of financial support options that your young people may be able to research and look into to join as an officer. And I think really just to qualify, I was an Army officer, regular officer for 30 years, and I've spent the last 10 years in the recruiting environment. And we sometimes forget that what we assume people know, officer and soldier differences, what are they? And really just to get you thinking on the right lines, if you're talking about an Army officer, that is somebody who joins to become a leader from the outset. They wouldn't do an apprenticeship, they wouldn't necessarily be involved in some of the trades that you've already seen, but what they do is lead and manage. They become our trainers, they become the soldiers' career managers, teachers and instructors. And then later in their careers, they become policymakers, operational planners, equipment procurers. But they are people who not just take responsibility for themselves, but for the soldiers that they lead. And as I say, we could rattle on for ages about what an officer does, but I would suggest you start researching into the essential differences. What are we looking for? To sum it up in 3 brief headings: people with perhaps a higher degree of intellectual capacity. 75% typically of our officer entrants who go through the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst are graduates. We're looking for personality, and we're looking for physical ability, and all that comes out in the selection process. Now, I mentioned there that typically 75% will be graduates, but we're trying to shift that slightly, and there is definitely an Army push to move more people directly to Sandhurst without degrees. And Craig will come back at the end of this briefing to talk about higher education programmes for non-graduate officers. What I will do now is talk through the 2 main strands of financial support that we can perhaps offer you. And Amy, if we move on to the first slide. And before I show you a little piece about Sandhurst itself, this is the Army Officer Scholarship Scheme. Mark Harrison, who's one of my team leaders, is available in the chat to answer any questions, so fire those into the chat as I go through. But essentially, this is a funding stream for 6th formers. You apply for a scholarship in year 12. The application window is open until the 31st of March this year for those in year 12, with the requisite number of ALICE points from their GCSEs. And if you are successful, not only do you get a payment in year 13 of £3,000, but you are guaranteed a place at Sandhurst to train as an officer within the next typically 5 years. But also, should you choose to go to university, and you don't have to if you take the scholarship scheme, but again, most do, you are automatically enrolled on the Army undergraduate bursary schemes, and there are 3 levels of that I'll come on to later on. So that, in a nutshell, is the Army Officer Scholarship Scheme. And Amy, perhaps we can move on to the video as we move towards Sandhurst. Okay, so differentiating now, I've shown you the scholarship before the video. That's aimed at our sixth form potential officers. And then the bursary, as described by some of the individuals on the video, is aimed to help you through university. For non-professionally qualified officers, doctors, dentists, vets, then we've got three options that you can elect to apply for. A standard bursary for any type of degree, paying you up to £7,000 to help you study. An enhanced bursary for those who are achieving academically to a higher level, probably coming into us with an A, B, B from your A levels, and on target for a 2-1 degree, but again, not restricted to any particular type of UK degree. And then finally, for our more technically minded officers, the Defence STEM undergraduate sponsorship for those going into the more technical cores, and they are listed there: the Royal Signals, the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, Royal Logistic Corps, Royal Engineers, and we're also adding in elements of the Intelligence Corps and the RLC, the Royal Logistic Corps. So you can see the numbers there. We can give you information on the website on how that breaks down for each year to help with the fees and how much goes to you to support the bursary. You also need to bear in mind that you are expected, if you are awarded bursaries, when you enter into the selection process, to join organisations called the University Officer Training Corps, who would look after you through university. Or if there isn't one locally and it's impossible to get to one, then you would be expected to look at joining possibly a local Army Reserve unit. So those are the bursaries, non-professionally qualified. If we move on to the next slide, for those of you who are thinking of going typically down the medical route, there are a range of bursaries to support your studies here. Doctors, dentists, vets, and pharmacists, and nursing officers. When I talk about nursing officers, they're people who come in to nurse, but typically, in my language, I would say from a sister grade, post-staff nurse type grades and above. And again, these are extremely attractive. We typically take, for example, up to 30 doctors in any one year. 25 typically would probably be able to apply for the bursary. And you apply for that at the end of your second year of a 5-year medical degree, and you get payments in years 3, 4, and 5. And then, as one of the individuals on the video showed, the Army helps you through F1 and F2 before sending you to Sandhurst for your 9-week commissioning course short, and then paying you £45,000 to help cover your fees. Slightly lesser, same for dentists, slightly lesser amounts for vets and pharmacists and nursing officers, but very attractive awards and schemes, very competitive. Why? Because we want the top 10%, and that's why they are so attractive. Thank you, Amy. So there'll be questions that you can answer at the end in this, but I'll hand you back to Craig now to talk about those officers who perhaps haven't taken a degree and what can the Army do for them once they're in service. Craig.
Yes, Dave. So absolutely right. So university is not for everybody. Perhaps it's just not in their particular life plan or their aspiration, or they don't want the student debt or any of the other sort of financial entanglements. And there is an opportunity to go to the Royal Military Academy of Sandhurst. And as you go through the first part of your career, the first 5 or 6 years of your career as an Army officer, you can simultaneously do a part-time degree with Reading Henley University. And so you can do a BSc, and that is, it's a really, really great program. Reading Henley is part of the Russell Group, top British university. And it's an MSc, a BSc, very much focused on developing people's leadership and management skills. But it sort of works on developing people's critical thinking, communication skills, and it's a really good foundation, setting people up for a career in the Army, but also outside of the Army as well. It's not an easy thing to do, and nobody should embark on it lightly, because being an Army officer is quite a challenging job in itself. But you're going to do a sequence of military educational courses, and so therefore you might as well get some civilian accreditation while you're doing it. And the sort of additional work often just involves an extra essay or a little sort of segment of work, but it all dovetails into somebody's sort of daily employment as an Army officer. And that obviously would allow somebody to leave leave the program 5 or 6 years having left Sandhurst with a degree which they got for free, which I think is absolutely fantastic thing when you consider how expensive not just tuition fee is, but accommodation and all the other sort of things as well. So it's a real great way for somebody leaving school, perhaps after a gap year, to really hit the ground fast. You start your career early, and you get simultaneously you're getting your university qualifications at the same time. Incidentally, if people arrive with a degree, then there is an option over the same period of time to upgrade that to a master's degree as well. So the Army Higher Education pathway, we don't have enough people who are non-grads taking advantage of what I think is a fantastic offer, the opportunity to get a degree from a very reputable Russell Group university for free while you work. Great offer. Right, that's it. Thanks, Amy.
Have we lost Amy? I think we're into Q&A, aren't we, Amy?
Is that the presentation's over?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
We're getting a few questions in, but we've also had a few questions previously. So I will kick off with some questions. There's one question that came in which says, how old do you need to be to join? But there's also a similar question which says, what is the minimum sign-up time for a young person if they join up before 18 or after 18?
Yeah, so I double checked this afternoon on the Army website. So if you just search Army jobs, if you Google it, it'll give you loads of information. And it says on the website you can apply age 15 and 7 months, but you don't start training until 15 and 9 months. The Army's not going to send you anywhere exciting abroad until you're 18. And the service that you do before 18, let's say you go to Harrogate, doesn't count into the minimum time, which is 4 years. That's my understanding. So if you join before 18, you could end up doing a little bit more than your 4 years. Now, 4 years, I think, is a really good time for somebody to join the Army. As I say, let's say you leave school age 18, perhaps you didn't achieve all the things that you wanted to or your parents wanted you to. What a great opportunity to get a regain, join the Army, leave age 22, should you wish to do so. And most people would probably choose to stay on a little bit longer or even for a full career. But a very successful military career could be that person who joins at 18, leaves at 22. And for me personally, military service is, I consider it to be a bit of a sacrifice. Absolutely. I've got to shave every day and wear this uniform. Thankfully, I think it makes me look very smart. But in return for that sacrifice, everybody who joins has the opportunity to leave better and to leave with qualifications and to set themselves up for the next stage of their life. So that's it.
Slightly different for the officer cohort. You start Sandhurst at the age of 18. As a scholar, you apply in year 12, so you could be 16 or 17, but you're not in the Army. You've just been awarded a scholarship. You can start an application if you're not a scholar from 17/9. You cannot go to Sandhurst till you're 18. You're expected to be in Sandhurst as a trainee before your 30th birthday, except for professionally qualified officers, when they can apply up till 36, and I think 11 months. And it's 4 years service. So that's 1 year training at Sandhurst and a minimum of 3 years commission service after there. But that can extend currently till, and it's just changed, till the age of 60.
Right, I'm going to try and do this in a slightly chronological way as the questions come in, but I may struggle as we've just had a spurt of 4 or 5 questions. There's a question here which says, can I join before I do my GCSE straight from school? I noticed that there was like some level 2 qualifications that you mentioned in the video. So does that mean that someone can join at that point?
Yeah, so for soldiers, you don't need any qualifications to join at all. None at all. So, that's not an issue at all. But if you want to be, Dave, what's the entry standard for officers, A levels?
Sorry, what's the
educational entry standard for Sandhurst?
Yeah, for it's 35 minimum of 35 allowance points from GCSEs, 7 GCSEs, including maths, English, science or language. In my old language at C or above, I think that's a 4, and then 72 UCAS points from no less than 2 and no more than 3 A levels.
I'm going to try and group a few questions together. So there's a question around residency. If you're currently based overseas with parents in the armed forces, is any issues that will prevent you from applying? And if you're a non-citizen in year 11, are you allowed to apply?
Well, so the first one, if you're serving abroad, if your parents are serving abroad, I don't see any problems at all. Of course, the best thing to do is to go to the website, go through the application process, and then, for that specific, individual, then, clearly we'll be able to get you an answer. The same is with residency as well. So I'm not completely up to speed with the residency rules, unless Amy can help me on these.
So the residency side is usually you have to be 5 years in the UK, but I know there is waivers going through at the moment. So yeah, the standard matrix is 5 years UK residency, and that's for both officer and soldier, I believe. David, is that right?
The officer residency is you need to be resident within the UK. For example, it's 2 years and 3 months, but of course UK passport, indefinite leave to remain. In addition to that. So
earlier in the presentation, you mentioned all the different great opportunities that is available through the Army, from training animals to being a medicine, to being a medic, etc. So there's a question here saying, do you have to apply to a stream, or can you work that out afterwards?
So it really depends on the cap badge that you join. So you would probably need a good idea what it is that you want to do in the Army. So in the Army, there are a whole range of trades, and you'd be joining one of those. So for example, if you're going to join, if you join the Royal Logistics Corps, the chances are you're either going to be a driver apprentice or you're going to be a chef apprentice. And in the same way, if you join the Royal Signals, you're likely to do a communications radio apprenticeship. So the apprenticeships are linked to the regiment or the corps that you join in the Army. That's not to say that you can't change your mind later on and swap cap badges. It's not straightforward, but it does happen. And the Army has recently invested quite a lot of time and effort to make it easier for people to retrain. And I think in one of the videos, we heard from an apprentice who retrained.
I think just adding on that one, Mitesh.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you really don't know what you want to do, it's not the end of the world, because when you do make your Army application, you do go into your local Army Career Centre and you do have an Army brief, and that is where the guys and the officers will go through a presentation and they show you every single job role that is available. And I was a recruiter before I came into marketing, and we had people changing their minds all the time, because once you go and do research, you find like a lot of opportunities. So the guys and the officers will be there to help and support you, but there is so many options available. So the biggest piece of advice is just make sure you do your research, and it's definitely something that you want to do.
Once again, slightly different in the officer space, that you don't necessarily join a stream. You get to Sandhurst, and then it's about to change into the end of the first term. You then make your choice of your regiment, and then that gets confirmed in the third term at Sandhurst. Because you're not training in the same way that a soldier does, and you are in a way more of a generalist.
Just a quick one on this, and I want to talk about some of the bursary questions they've got there. Someone's asked if you can be a lawyer in the Army. Is that one of the things you can do?
Yes, you can. Army Legal Service typically take about 10 lawyers a year, but it's qualified solicitors or completed the training contracts or pupillage, not 100%, but typically 1 or 2 years after of service as a lawyer, and then you can join the Army up to the age of 36, is my understanding.
Okay, so just to clarify, you have to be a qualified lawyer before you can.
At the moment, yes, they are looking at some training contracts, but that's not been confirmed yet. But at the moment, you must be a qualified lawyer.
There's a question on here about the scholarships and the bursaries. If you get one of those and decide the Army career is not for you, are you obligated to pay that money back, or what
I
happens
think
then?
if yes, pretty much so. If you, for a medical reason, you were injured and you could no longer pass the medical, then that's a different question. If you took the scholarship, you took the £3,000 in year 13, and then decided you didn't want to join, the army/government money would be within their right to seek that money back.
So a couple of questions on like A levels and results, etc. Could you just recap what the entry requirements are for A levels, and could you also just let us know if you don't achieve the grades you're expected to achieve, whether that stops you from progressing in the army, or whether that's going to be a hindrance, or if there's any support available to help you get through that?
I think Mark's just put an confirmation of the GCSE and A-level grades that I mentioned, without labouring it, but you need to hit those grades that, we don't really, occasionally we might look at an academic waiver if you're missing 1 or 2 points and you've then gone on to get a good degree. But it's, the trick is to get studying, get the GCSEs under your belt and your UCAS points, and make sure you meet those targets of 35 and 72 Alice and UCAS points.
Someone's asked, what's the selection criteria for applying for an AHEP?
Oh, the Army Higher Education pathway. Well, that's entry to Sandhurst.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a question here: what is the physical requirements and training for an officer?
Physical requirement is the entry. The place called Army Officer Selection Board at Westbury does your 3-day or 4-day main board assessments, and there's a fitness element in that. And at the moment, it's 75 kg on what they call a mid-thigh pull, a fixed bar, a medicine ball throw of I want to say 3.9 of a 3.9 meters of a 4 kilogram medicine ball, and the multi-stage fitness test, the beat test, at level 8.7. That's the standard to enter Sandhurst.
Talking about fitness and physical stuff, there's a question here saying, are there any careers in sports science or music within the Army?
Music in particular, yes. You've got the Royal Corps of Army Music. All their criteria is on the main website, but I believe you have to be graded in a specific instrument. The application process is the same for soldier, but in particular, I know Arkham are looking for musicians quite a lot at the moment, and that's a really great opportunity. So all the criteria is on their website, and I believe they've got a couple of events coming up soon. So if you follow them on social media, they do link all of their events on there.
The second one was about physical fitness, and there's the Royal Army PT Corps. And typically what happens is that somebody joins as a soldier. They will then transfer after a number of years into the Royal Army PT Corps, and they've got a program which supports people getting qualifications that way.
Yeah, and just to confirm what Craig said there, you cannot join the Royal Army Physical Training Corps or Corps of Army Music directly as an officer. You start as a soldier and then commission once you've been selected from within.
So there's a question we got earlier before the webinar started, that which was what skills and qualifications are needed to become a helicopter pilot?
Good eye-hand coordination, I imagine.
I
don't know, Dave, do you know?
Yeah, I've got a bit more maybe on that. The Army still, unlike the other two services, or the Royal Marines might be slightly different, still takes soldier pilots. So you can join as a soldier. You do not need to go to Sandhurst. And as long as you pass aircrew, which is run at Cranwell, aircrew aptitude testing, then you can, when you're already serving, I think they typically look at people from Lance Corporal rank upwards, and you can apply. You don't need to be in the Army Air Corps to apply for pilot training, is my understanding. If you want to be an officer pilot, you've got to get to Sandhurst first. They want you to be an officer first and then a pilot. And at some stage, again, you will do the aircrew aptitude assessments, and you will do some Army flying grading, which the Army Air Corps organise for you, just to check that what sort of aircraft they would want then to train you on. So 2 entry routes, officer and soldier. The officer one, the officer entry standards. For the soldier one, it could be from any arm or service, and that might mean you may have joined something like the infantry or the Royal Armoured Corps with no formal qualifications.
There's a question on here which says, which has been asked, which says, what subjects are recommended to take for A-levels in order to maximise potential entering the army as an undergraduate officer to train at Sandhurst? But before you answer that, I'm gonna, I think there's so many routes that could be quite a wide answer. So I'm going to sort of change it slightly and say, like, what kind of qualities do you look for in an individual, you know, so that they might maximise their potential once they're in the army, or whilst they're interviewing, or part of the recruitment process?
Well, I think we'll tackle this in 2 halves. I'll deal with the soldiers, Dave can deal with the officers. For soldiers, ideally we want somebody who wants to be better, to be the best. It sounds really corny, but we are really invested in developing our people. So, you know, we have slightly less than 80,000 soldiers in the British Army, and 40,000 of them are funded on some kind of educational program by the Army each year. And so what we really want are people who want to be better, who wants to be better tomorrow than they are today. And I think if you approach the Army with that mindset, then you will achieve amazing things. You will amaze yourself, you will amaze your parents, and you will amaze your friends. You know, one of the things that I find really heartwarming is quite often I get the opportunity to go to passing off parades for soldiers. And when I meet the parents of our young soldiers, the first thing they tell me is that they do not recognize their children. Yeah, they don't recognize them because they have developed, they have grown, they have matured, they have been given a sense of purpose and a bit of focus, and they've had some really good positive role models, which they now seek to emulate and to follow. So I'd say, you know, the number one quality is just to want to improve, to be a self-improver.
And I think a lot of that applies for our young officers, but we also want them to be confident, have personality. I mentioned the 3 aspects that this selection board particularly focus on: intellectual capacity, personality, and physical ability. But we want confidence. We want people who want to take on responsibility, happy to work outside comfort zones, and all those things fit in. So yeah, a rounded individual prepared to take responsibility.
We've just had one question in, which I think is quite a nice question. Well, it's also just been answered. Do you get holiday? I suppose if parents are on here going to want to see their kids, want to see if they get some time off. So what holiday do you get, and what other benefits do you get if you know, over and above like your salary and?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, the key thing to know, and certainly I'll talk about I can talk about soldiers, but I can also talk a little bit about being an officer. You know, I worked elsewhere before I joined the Army, and I always say to people, I gave up the opportunity to be rich for the certainty of never being poor. Military service is you know, you dedicate your life to the defense of the realm, and that does sound really cheesy, but it gives you a great sense of purpose and focus. And when you're involved in great state occasions, you know, the funeral of the Queen, or the coronation of the King, or whatever it is, or when you're deployed on, you know, peacekeeping operations abroad, you get a real sense that you are doing something special, that you're doing something important with your life that is making a difference. And that's one of the great rewards of being in the Army. The other reward is being part of a team. We're a team of teams. Sometimes we're only 4 or 5 of us together someplace, or we are thousands together on parade. But we're a part of that team. And then, you know, these sort of financial benefits are pretty good. The package is pretty solid. You know, you're not going to become rich unless you buy lottery tickets. But it's a good life. It's a good life. And there are loads of opportunities to, you know, to get free education, free qualifications, to learn really important people skills. You know, how to work with people that you would never have encountered otherwise, from other nations, from other countries, people who don't even speak your language, you know, when you're working abroad. But, you know, it's a career unlike any other. and very seldom are 2 days ever the same. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's genuinely quite hard. It's type 2 fun. You don't enjoy it when it's cold, wet, and miserable, and you're on Salisbury Plain. But afterwards, when you can laugh about it with your mates, that's priceless and that's invaluable. And that's Army service.
To be honest, I can't think of a better way to have ended. Like we're a couple of minutes over, and there are more questions. We'll try and get some of you guys to answer them and send them over to you by email. But I can't think of a better way to have ended it. To hear just what you said there about camaraderie, etc. So thank you to our Army panel, and thank you everyone for attending. We hope you found it informative, and we'll record this, so if there's anything you've missed, we'll be on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out some feedback survey, etc. afterwards. So thank you everybody, and have a great evening.